So we got off the topic, but the Timberwolves, their late season surge, how much are you buying into it? Their schedule hasn't been the best, but they won 7 games in a row. Could be 8 after today if they beat the Jazz.
They beat the
And
Jazz.
12
They're
and
getting
0
together.
in the last 12 games that Randle has played. 13 and 0 now. You just +1 to all these numbers because they're going to beat the Jazz. Riv, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. I have a question. Fuck how you asked that question. Let's get to the meat of the conversation because
What else?
you have been very flippy floppy with a lot of teams this year. You have been. And let's not act like you haven't. But I'm
Like
here
who?
today because I want you to give me an honest opinion. That's why I think you should go first. And I'll ask you the question. Fuck the political question you asked. I'm going to ask you a simple, straightforward question. Can Minnesota make the finals? Western Conference Finals. I'm just going to ask you that. I'm going to start there. And then if you want to go further and tell me they can make the finals, by all means, do your thing, brother. But I want the truth because you have told me Ant-Man shooting leap, top 20 all time. Jaden leap, Julius Randle's going to translate. Jalen Clark can lock up Steph. You didn't told me a lot about this Minnesota team. So, and they're undefeated with Julius Randle, I believe, or maybe they lost one game, whatever it is. But they've been great. So because of all that, I know how you get where you love runs. You love runs in the NBA. A team going to run, you buy in, then they lose a lot, you buy out, and then you put $100 on them, and then you jump off ship. So I know your trick. So I'm asking you.
He's getting nasty.
Today,
You're getting nasty.
I'm asking you today because you've been real mute on Minnesota all year, but now you're semi.
Does the answer matter if the answer is different tomorrow?
I'm curious.
Wow.
Where you at with it, man?
Wow.
The Minnesota Timberwolves can make the conference finals.
Will they?
Will they is a different question. You're asking me if can they. I'm going to ask the first question. I think they can make the Western Conference Finals. I think they are a top 5 team in the West, and it's all matchup dependent. But when you look at what this team is doing, number one, the most important thing is about Julius Randle. And I think Julius Randle in the regular season has given them a lot in terms of his playmaking, something that they didn't have last year with Cat. And that's why before the season, I thought that the Timberwolves potentially got better because they added an all-star player and they had depth on their team as well. So don't try to call me out from Minnesota. I've said that they could have been better than last year after the trade happened. So don't you do that, mister. So I'll tell you this. The Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards shooting 40% from 3. I mean, I think, number one, it starts with him. And he is one of the best players in the world. He's the best shooting guard in the world. There are very few players I trust in a playoff series over Anthony Edwards for what he's shown. He's the only player outside of LeBron James in a playoff run to have 400 points, 200 rebounds, 200 assists, and lead a team to the conference finals at age 22 years old or younger. That's how good Anthony Edwards is. And when you look at the depth around this team, I mean, they could go, 10 players deep? You look at Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, Donte DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jalen Clark. I mean, this team has so much depth. Even if they need somebody like Terrence Shannon Jr. to provide a spark, they made a huge run with Anthony Edwards on the bench against OKC in the game they beat them, and that was because of the bench that led that spark. So this Minnesota team, as of recently, the competition hasn't been the best, but last time I checked on primetime, they smoked Denver, who against Jokic, who's second in MVP voting.
Raise your hand if you're moved by Denver.
I'm moved by smoking Denver. They smoked Denver. It wasn't even close. I don't think
Lakers
that
smoked Denver.
I don't. Yeah, right. And I'm moved by the Lakers. I don't think that if Denver matches up with Minnesota, they could realistically beat them in a series. So I think that's one team already from the top echelon of teams. I think Minnesota could beat. I think Golden State is a tougher series just because they're a much mature, experienced team. But the space into that team really rubs me the wrong way. And I think Golden State can get in a lot of teams' heads. They can't get in the head of Anthony Edwards. I've already seen Draymond Green talk smack to Anthony Edwards at the foul line before, asking him if he wanted to throw down, and Anthony Edwards responded by scoring 30 plus and beating him. That's how he responds when he's met with that type of animosity. This team, Julius Randle is so important to what this team's going to be. Even with Cat being up and down, he was phenomenal in the Denver series. You need Julius Randle to play at an all-star level, and we still haven't seen that yet. But if he can play well, if he plays differently with this amount of spacing around him, if he's making teams get punished for having mismatches on him, then this team can go to the conference finals. I mean, before the season started, we looked top to bottom at Minnesota's roster, and we thought this was going to be a top 4 team in the Western Conference because they were so loaded with talent. We're just seeing them finally figure it out. We're seeing Randle and Gobert learn how to play together. We're seeing Jaden McDaniels. The scoring hasn't dipped with Randle in the lineup. He's still averaging anywhere between 18 to 19 points per game, and he's really found his rhythm with his game, and they have a multitude of defenders. There's a reason why you think that they are the biggest threat to OKC out west. It's because they can match up with them in that type of way. So I think Minnesota can make the conference finals because they have a superstar and they have the right supporting cast around him.
Just before anybody else goes, let it be known that he brought up Ant-Man chirping at Draymond, and they proceeded to lose 3 games to Golden State out of 4. So that chirping got him 3 outs.
Who played?
Ant-Man.
The next 3 games. Who played the next 3 games?
Ant-Man.
Mention that.
Ant-Man.
Did Jalen Clark play?
That's his fault.
Okay. All right.
Fuck,
different team. Different team.
Well, we have Jimmy now.
When was the last Golden State game that Minnesota played them?
I think January.
I don't care about that.
Well, Jimmy's here, so come on.
Come on. Right. Hey, listen, it's going to be a good matchup.
Let's run it back, man.
I got to give a lot of credit to what's been going on in Minnesota. I think we always talk about Minnesota, and obviously it always starts with Anthony Edwards, and rightfully so. The 3-point leap that he's taken this season, it caught the world by surprise. I'd say for him to be this efficient for this entirety of the season, I thought that I think we all asked him to carry over a bit of his playoff push as a jump shooter into this regular season. Never thought that it'd be this great, this efficient, this high volume. I just can't get enough of Anthony Edwards this season. He's really taken me. My appreciation of his game has really gone to new heights that I didn't think we can get to. I say this, Jaden McDaniels, Joel, I have to give you your flowers. You never wavered.
He's always had this.
Jaden McDaniels, he's been doing his thing. He's
Never
been pretty
wrong.
consistent on the offensive side. You knew what he had on the defensive side, but we always wanted more on the offense, especially with that contract that he was getting. He was getting paid primarily because of how elite he is as a defender. But there was always this belief that he could take another stride as an offensive player, and we're starting to see that more and more. Donte getting healthy. You got Julius Randle obviously back into the lineup. They barely lose when he's in the lineup nowadays. They've just been playing great team basketball. The defense has been locked in. The offense has really figured it out recently. And you mentioned the depth. The only thing that comes into my mind, because it's been in my head all show since you said it, that you think that they're the deepest team next to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think they are a deep team. I think that it gets lost that the Lakers are still 9-10 deep. Realistic, when you do look at the Los Angeles Lakers, just want to put that out there. But regardless of that, you're right. The fact that they've gone through as many injuries as they have, and these young guys have come in and they've really stepped up. We have to give credit to Clark, what he means for the defensive side of the ball, his ability to knock down a shot from time to time, but really what he brings on the defensive side. It's just really just how consistent they've been recently against mediocre opponents, to be fair. But regardless, you have to go out there and you have to play against who's there on your schedule. I don't know if I'm buying all in on them being a legitimate threat to Oklahoma City. I don't know if I'm buying for them being a legitimate WCF team right now, especially because Julius Randle, for what he's shown me in the past, maybe this is just a different situation for him. Maybe this is just a new year where he's going to go out there and now this scheme perfectly fits him because now he does have spacing alongside. But I think it's, for me, I need to see it. I'm not just going to go out there and go on a limb and say just because it's a new situation that automatically it's going to transfer over. I just want to wait and see for them. But again, you have to love what you're seeing from Minnesota. They've been great. They're exciting to watch, and I think that's really most important.
And I sucks because I haven't mentioned this just yet, but then you'll go, Dales, real quickly. Maybe you can speak on this and elaborate on it more, actually. The playmaking leap Anthony Edwards has taken.
Yeah, actually, I do have some notes on Ant-Man's playmaking. The numbers haven't drastically changed, but pre-All-Star break, 4.5 assists to 3.5 turnovers. Post-All-Star break, 5.2 assists to 2.5 turnovers. So he's definitely improved, but the numbers don't tell the full story. I feel like when you watch, he mentioned how he's been studying Luka. I feel like the one specific thing he's got better at is skip passes into the corners. I feel like that's one area where I feel like, last year and then even earlier this season that he has struggled with, but as the season has progressed, he's definitely improved on. I don't look at the Timberwolves as a Western Conference Finals team just yet. I just worry about once the playoffs come around, is Julius Randle going to keep this up? Is Jaden McDaniels going to keep this up? Those are two big question marks to me because Jaden has been great post All-Star break. He's averaging 18 and 8, 52% from the field, 34% from three, which is decent. But again, he looks more comfortable on offense, right? When he's getting closed out on, he's putting the ball on the floor, he's attacking the rim, and overall is just being a more complete offensive player, which it's basically what we've asked for a while. It's like, listen, even if it's not efficient, even if it's not pretty, like at least be a threat with the ball in your hands, especially if you're going to sit in the corner a majority of the time on offense. And Julius Randle really is the biggest difference, right? Because before his injury, before this groin injury, right around the All-Star break, it wasn't pretty for Minnesota. Like obviously the start wasn't pretty, but even like halfway through the season, it wasn't pretty. But I was reading this article on Sports Illustrated, and he mentioned how sitting out for that, month or so stretch through the All-Star break really helped him, just being able to fit in, deciding when to set a screen, when to drive, when to play make, when to play with pace. All of these things where when you're on the court, it's probably more difficult because everything's happening in real time. Even when you sit on your bench, even when you sit on the bench, I should say, there's just so much emotion in it too. Like if you have a shitty 8-minute stint, you're probably not going to the bench being like, damn, I need to do all of this better. You're probably upset with yourself. And the opposite, if you go out there and you hit 3 threes in the first 5 minutes, you're probably feeling good. You're not thinking about how to improve, but rather just keep doing what I'm doing. So I do think those are the 3 biggest takeaways from the Wolves in this latest stretch. It's just Randle being a better fit altogether. Jaden McDaniels, an offensive player, has improved, and Anthony Edwards as a playmaker has improved. As you mentioned, the stretch of games hasn't been great, right? You've played over the 8-game win streak. You had the Jazz today. Played the Suns, Sixers, Charlotte, Miami, Spurs, Nuggets, and Magic. So, it's not the litmus test to like, are you a true contender? Because I do think there's some question marks that come up with this team in a potential playoff series against a lot of the teams we mentioned. So I think, even at their worst, I feel like they're probably the 6th best team in the Western Conference. The argument over Denver, I could hear it. I also don't want to get too caught up in like a 15-game stretch for Timberwolves versus the Nuggets where once looked really good and once looked really shitty, even though they beat him in the playoffs last year, which is an argument that you could certainly make. But the way this team's been able to turn it around, you have to applaud. And John mentioned it. The rest of the season schedule is pretty easy once you get past this Nuggets and Bucks game. So
yep.
And climb out of the play-in, which also means, you're probably going to have a pretty decent first-round opponent. You might play the Warriors in that first round, might play the Lakers in that first round. So it'll be a fun series regardless. But overall, I'm not completely bought in on them being like a contender, but they're a team that before this stretch, they're getting bounced in the first round. Maybe they get bounced in the play-in. After this stretch, I could see a world where they get to the second round of the playoffs.
Yo, Dels, this is not me trolling. I just want to ask because I forgot the numbers you said. What was the assist to turnover numbers? What was
for
5.2 to 2.2 some?
Yeah, pre-All-Star break, 4.5 assists to 3.5 turnovers. Post-All-Star, 5.2 assists to 2.4 turnovers.
So 5 to 2. Okay. Yo, we're working.
That's good.
We're getting somewhere. Okay, that's what I like to see. Listen, man. Like Dels mentioned, a lot of these new teams that are either getting their players back healthy or they made a trade, they're really hot. Golden State, Minnesota, for example. Minnesota and getting Randle back in the lineup. Golden State and bringing in, like my brother Drew always mentioned, a legendary playoff performer in our era, Jimmy Butler, a guy who he thought could move the needle. Somebody on here didn't think he could move the needle, and now he thinks they can make a deep run. It's crazy to me how people just change up. But neither here nor there. I'm gonna give Drew his props because he'd been there.
Well, you're muted. You're muted. And God entered the chat.
I said 15 game sample size.
Listen, all I'm gonna say is
sample size.
Can I finish?
Well, I don't know. Riv went from Anthony Edwards can't play make and Jaden McDaniels sucks to they're the biggest threat to OKC in the West.
If you let me explain that before interrupting me.
Oh, but you could explain things. Oh, okay. I see.
Explain that.
Okay.
Because unlike you,
turn to talk. I'm interested to hear what he has to say.
Unlike you, Mr. Joel V. Moran, I like to sit and wait on things. I like this. I've not spoken about Jaden. I let it marinate. Ever since I said he was trash, which was months ago, I've let things marinate. Ever since I said, first of all, Dels was the one who called Ant. He said Ant need to get better IQ. He said that on the live. Drew laughed.
I just
That's
asked.
what happened.
You also
That is
questioned the
what actually
playmaking,
happened.
Riv.
That's what happened. I said that.
Riv, you
months
called
ago.
him a 6 out of 10 IQ.
That was crazy to me, but neither here nor there. Minnesota's a good team. I think for me, it's always matchup dependent. I always try to look at when these teams play each other, how they get up for the game. And I think Minnesota, OKC, from what I've seen this year, both teams get up for this game. Both teams treat this game like a hostile environment. Same way how, Boston and Cleveland plays. They get up for those games. That's why they're always fire. Same way how like Golden State, OKC, Golden State Lakers, in prior years, they just like to get up for those games because, it's a big time games. They want to show out. And, from what I've seen from OKC, Minnesota, it's been tough. Now, though I think they're a top 5 team. Top 5 team is weird to me because I think everything like Denver in theory is a top 5 team, but there's teams that, you could probably pick under them that they could probably lose to. I think OKC is a great team. I think the Lakers are a really good team. Golden State, I can see them being in top 5, but I can see a world where, we haven't played a shit ton of competition and where you might still want to wait and see. We have an incredible stretch coming up in April, so that's going to be huge. But in terms of just Minnesota, figuring out their depth, I think their offense being the calling card for them since like January, I think that's most important, like them having a high-powered offense. Granted, like you mentioned, it's against weaker competition, so, but you want to build those healthy habits now. So when you do play those top competitive teams, you play those top defenses, the healthy habits are repetitive. You start to be able to do those things consistently. The problem with, like a team like Golden State, I keep using for example, their system, they've been doing it for a decade is why it's a habit. It's a habit from Steph. It's a habit through Draymond. And Jimmy's just a smart IQ player, so he'll figure out the habit eventually. But for Minnesota, Ant taking a leap, Julius Randle being really well in this stretch, Donte coming back. You have guys in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You have Naz Reid scorching it from the three-point line, and being a really good ball handler and a penetrator at the rim. It's just been kind of everything coming into fruition with this team. You heard that word at the end, coming into fruition with this team. The team is really starting to define their trend. And we always talk about it. You want to get hot towards the end of the year around playoff time, because I think you can continue that hot streak into the playoffs. Now they're sitting at 7th or 8th. They're sitting at 7th right now. You got Golden State at 6. They're like a half game apart from each other. So this is going to be
very easily be 6 soon.
Yeah, this is going to be like a dogfight for a while. And then you got the Lakers, I think 2 games ahead, if I'm not mistaken. They won today, so maybe 3. And then you got Memphis like a game ahead of the Lakers.
The Rockets are the 2nd seed. They've been on a win streak.
Yeah, Houston starting to get their win streak.
Game heater.
Yeah, so Houston's another team where I think if they play Minnesota, I would take Minnesota to win because of Ant-Man. But that's another tough-ass series where I've seen both of them play. Houston's defense makes it really tough for them. Like that's
the Rockets are a tough matchup for Minnesota.
Yeah, I don't want to shoo away these matchups just because offensively they may not get it right. Because a lot of these teams where they pride themselves on defense, they make it really tough. And I think Houston, defensively they make it really tough for a lot of these teams. But Minnesota, you gotta if you're a Minnesota fan, you're loving what you're seeing from this offense. Defense doesn't miss a beat. You're loving what you're seeing, and not just for this year too. Like for next year and going forward, Jaden's young, Ant's obviously young, Naz Reid's young. Like for this core, Jalen Clark's still young, Rob Dillingham young. Like you want this core to trend in the right direction, just for future purposes. Their plan was to re-sign Naz Reid. I'm pretty sure their plan was to bring back Alexander Walker. So these are a lot of the young guys that you're going to be playing with. Wow, that you're going to be having on your team for the foreseeable future. So you want to see constant improvement, and the fact that you're getting that from these players is really, for me, the intriguing part about it all. It's not just you being 17 and you winning all these games. It's you get the leap from Jaden. Like that's the thing you've been expecting, and you get all this good production from these young players.
Well, the top 5 teams in the West, I think, are pretty clearly. I don't care what order you have it, but it's clearly OKC, Lakers, Warriors, Minnesota, and Denver.
What if you have the Nuggets at 1?
I don't. I think you're crazy.
Then the order does matter. See, order does matter a little bit.
Outside of the first team,
he's a dick. He's a dick, man.
He's right. No, outside of OKC being number 1, I think outside of that, yeah, Denver is the team I'm lowest on of all those teams. I just don't think they have it this year. And I think Jokic has talked about the defense, and he said that you're not just going to flip a switch. I don't think this is the year for them defensively and offensively. They just have a lot of stuff that is just out of sync.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. On the Minnesota front, you guys covered it so well. I think most of us thought this was a lost year in January when this team, lost Julius Randle and Donte Divincenzo was ruled out indefinitely. And the last couple of months, everything has come together. And it's a young team where they're all clicking. They're mostly in their 20s. Donte Divincenzo comes back last 9 games, making nearly 50% of his threes while averaging 4 assists in that time frame. And Devo is a really unique player because last year with the Knicks, he stepped up big time in the wake of injuries and was able to create a lot of offense with them. And then he gets traded in the middle of October, just 3 weeks before the season starts. So he gets off to the super slow start. Minnesota is making 32% of his threes. Doesn't seem to be a great fit. But then right around the new year, he starts to catch fire until the toe sprain hits. So getting him back has been huge. And then a little bit of data here. Jaden McDaniels, first 33 games, 9 points, under 5 rebounds, 43% from the field. 2 stocks. Last 33 games, 15 points a game, 7 rebounds, crashing the glass in attack mode, 52% from the field, almost 10% higher, making 36% of his threes with 2.5 stocks. So seeing him kind of revitalize his offense by being a lot more aggressive, not being that standstill spot up shooter, it's weaponized him in some really unique ways and kind of paid off given the contract that they gave him. So to have Devo, Jaden McDaniels, and then of course, Julius Randle playing a little more aggressive. It's all for this nice look where the T-Wolves have 3 to 4 different creators alongside Ant. And then to go along with that, Chris Finch can really rely on his top 8 guys. And then after that, you have like 3 more players so you can plug and play in different matchups.